Hi, everybody. My name is Russell Robinson. I'm the founder of Amplified Research and Consulting based in Washington, D.C., in the States. And I'm excited to be a part of this Caribbean Strategy Conference. It's an awesome lineup. Some people I'm excited to hear from. Some people I've worked with before at a couple of other conferences. Looking at the lineup, I really get excited about events like this because, on one hand, I get to share my knowledge, what I know, but I also get a chance to sit back and listen and learn from some outstanding thought leaders. So, shout out to Francis and Dale Wade. They always put together a high quality product, and the speaker experience is always stellar. So, I like the topic of this conference for thinking of strategy. I wear a few hats. I work for an entity in the federal government, U.S. federal government, and I'm in charge of training and employee engagement. So I wear the hat of a trainer and a training provider. I'm also an adjunct professor at American University where I teach grad level leadership classes. So in that aspect, I am the trainer, and also have an LLC where I do consulting and research. And the amazing thing is, everybody talks about strategy. Everybody talks about change management. And from my training hat, I often tend to find that strategy does not link up with talent management. And that's really the topic of today's conversation. That's really the topic of my slide presentation. So, what I want to start off with is to tell you, give you an example of talent management as it relates to customer service. And I think no matter what industry you're in, whether it's hospitality or government or consulting, there's a role that customer service plays. And I think in my role with the federal government, we had a new supervisor who came to me and was basically saying that she didn't feel her staff provided adequate customer service to customers. And I don't really think I disagree with her. I mean, I'd done some work with her group, and I didn't find the customer service to be anything outstanding or stellar. And she felt it was worse than that. And when I talked to her, I said, "Okay, well, you've got to meet people where they are. You're right as a supervisor is if you want to change the standard for customer service, you have every right to do that. Um, but as the training provider, I noticed you haven't submitted any type of training budget to get them where they need to be." And she kept saying, "Well, they should just be able to provide better customer service." And I said, "Well, you also, from a talent management standpoint, you have to train them. It also gets into how you select." So I once talked to I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was an HR leader, and what we often talked about was her shop was notoriously known for providing poor customer service. But she had one guy who was fantastic. He would meet you where you are. He was very grateful in how he communicated with you, either by phone or by email. He would always give you updates. I know I promised you X by Thursday, but it's Wednesday night. I'm running a little behind. I promise you, Dr. Russ, you'll have it by Friday. And finally, I asked him because his customer service was so different. And he basically said, "Well, before I worked here, I actually was a customer service rep for a cable TV company, and customer service is us. It's what we do." And based on this information, I have a real good friend who is a manager for a cable company in the eastern part of the U.S. I think his span of control is, I think, 300, give or take, 300 people. And I was asking him about it, like, "So how do you do customer service? We're trying to improve our customer service here." And he's like, "Russ, how much training do you do?" I said, "We don't do any training." And he said, "Yeah, my people, before they interact with a customer, they've been through 6 weeks of training." Now, for me, he says, for me, I really like when the person applying for a job has come from a retail or service industry, someone like a waitress, someone like a skycap, or someone who works for tips, somebody who there's a direct correlation between the customer service they provide and their income. And he said those people often tend to be a little bit inherently more customer service centric. But it really like I said, it really gets back to talent management. So if you look at where we are from a strategic standpoint, and everybody's got some form of strategy. I'm in the human capital field, so my examples will probably be from the human capital point of view. And if you look at where we are right now, the big thing popping off is the return to work. Um, Companies, organizations are returning back to the workforce from being home for the past 27 months in some form or shape. The Great Resignation, people are finding that their purpose has changed or where they want to work has changed. And if you look, a lot of industries are running shorthanded right now. A lot of people are resigning. That gets to like talent management and workforce planning. And then lastly, the big thing is what type of workplace do we come back to? Is it hybrid? Is it remote? Is it some form of is it everybody is in the office? And here's the thing, no matter what your strategy is, each of those choices or decisions are going to have a talent management impact. So what we've seen is, if you look at what we've been through the past 27 months, um, obviously we've had the pandemic. So how do we test? How do we bring people in? How do we make sure that everybody's safe? We've also had with here in the States with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, the Atlanta spa shootings. We have that people are impacted by social justice issues, and that is changing how they represent themselves at work, but also what they want from their employer. Right now in Eastern Europe, there's a war going on, and there are people who are impacted by that. Either they're of Eastern European descent, or they have friends and family of Eastern European descent, or they have family who are service members who may be stationed in Eastern Europe. And when I talk to people, I'm doing some research on teachers and principals right now. When I speak to civil servants, when I speak to my friends who are managers and directors, the common thing they all talk about is, I'm exhausted. My staff is exhausted. We're overwhelmed. We're dealing with burnout. We're dealing with depression. As you weave all of that into your strategic plan, that's going to have a role on how it impacts the talent management aspect of your strategy as you move forward. So I think when I look at talent management, I have two clients that are CEOs, and one had the aspect of, our goal is to be very technical. Uh, we need talent that can develop and deliver simple, repeatable processes. Very functional, very technical. The challenge with that is when you build your strategy from that standpoint, and you do your workforce planning and your hiring based on a staff that can do simple, repeatable processes. For example, let's say you've got a billing center and someone has missed a billing payment, or they need an address change. Really simple, really easy. You can use a lot of best practices, and that's good. The challenge is if you have complex or complicated problems, simple solutions may actually make the outcome worse. So in that standpoint, that strategic plan had a very limit from a talent management standpoint, created a situation where if you have if you have a pandemic, and one of the big things we've learned over the past couple years is through working through home, people are finding that they really miss connection. And leaders, supervisors need to be able to connect with people. For this CEO, he had built a talent management strategy where all he wanted was technical skills, technical expertise. So having a staff with having leaders and supervisors with emotional intelligence, that wasn't part of the hiring process, that wasn't part of the training process. But then it meant that when strategy became difficult, when difficult problems came up, he didn't have leaders with the skill set or training, and he wasn't training toward the skill set where you can have a way to deal with complex or complicated problems. You don't know how to seek out different perspectives and ask questions instead of providing answers, or see the problem as a system, and instead just see the problem as a simple cause and effect. Conversely, I was working with a CEO whose goal was very heavily focused on workforce development, very heavily focused on teaching supervisors and leaders how to become emotionally intelligent, how to connect with people, how to be flexible, agile, but also be strategic. And what you found there was when you said, we're going to build this into our strategy, then you have the flexibility when life and situations come at you sideways and problems become a little bit more complicated. You have a talent skill set that has the ability to adapt to those type of problems. So this really gets into like, what is the role of the CHRO? Research from Ram Sharan, Dominic Berto, and Dennis Corey talk about the relationship between the CEO, the CFO, and the Chief Human Resource Officer, the CHRO. And what they found was, while businesses and organizations often tended to state that people were their most important asset, that the role of HR, the function of the CHRO was often undervalued. And what that means is, so I had a real good friend who explained it to me. She was a deputy CHRO for a group of TV stations, and she was saying her challenge was, she was the deputy CHRO, and she was trying to explain to her boss, the CHRO, that he had to be in the strategic conversations with the CEO and the CFO. Because if he wasn't, then the CEO and the CFO would set the strategy, set the course, set the target for their company. But because the CHRO wasn't involved in it, that strategy had no reliable concept on how that strategy would impact resources, either from the number of resources needed, or the skill set of the resources needed, or to fill that gap for resources, whether you could get that talent in-house, or whether you had to hire, or whether you had to contract out. So I think it's very important for, if you are in that CHRO role, or you're the CEO, that you find a way to bring the CHRO or bring that HR function into the conversation, so that you can know what the talent impact from a talent management standpoint, what happens to strategic changes. So, like, for example, if for example, if you're saying your strategic plan is that we want a more not technical workforce, but a technology savvy workforce, because you want them to, when it comes to data, spend more time analyzing data versus manipulating data, then that's going to have a training impact. That's going to have a hiring impact. So if you know that up front, then as you're mapping out your plan, and let's say you're putting resources or you're putting money on it, then you have a more realistic aspect of what it needs for that strategy, for that strategic philosophy or methodology to be successful. So I think I'm a big fan of the Premier League in England and Manchester United. And I often think of Sir Alex Ferguson, who is one of the winningest managers in European football history. But in his book Leading, he talked about like his talent management philosophy, and his goal was to always say, how do I put a starting 11 players that right now are the best to set us up to win in competitions. But then also, I need to keep an eye on what type of talent I need to have 3 years from now. How has the competition changed? How do I anticipate the game will change? And how 3 years from now will I have the right proper talent? And he likened it to his team to like a slow moving conveyor belt. So at the end of every year, a couple players would cycle out, a couple new players would cycle in. But I really like that aspect of where are we at now for our strategy now? What type of talent do we need for our industry and where it's going? What type of talent do we need 3 years? You can pick your number. 3 years from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. And I think, I go back to what we learned from the pandemic, from the research I do, and like having leaders who can connect with staff and create a voice culture where people can share their thoughts, ideas, concerns about the organization, but also how they're presenting themselves at work, puts you in a position where you can navigate whatever strategies or strategic changes come down the pipeline. So I think the big thing, and the one thing I say is the only constant is in life is change. The only constant in work is change. And one of the things I've noticed for where we are now, like when you're looking at strategy and talent management, okay, where are we going to get our people? So when we talk about remote work, hybrid work, return to work, everybody in person, I think 5 or 6 years ago, the talent would have to go to work, where the workplace was. Now companies are taking the advantage of, now they can take the work to wherever the talent is. And maybe what that means is, maybe let's say, so I'm in Washington, D.C. In the past, let's say if a training provider, because I'm in the training field, a specific training provider for a type of training I like is based in, for this example, we'll say St. Martin. Then I would try to convince that either I wouldn't look to St. Martin for the best training provider, I look in the DC metro area. Or if I found this outstanding training provider in St. Martin, I heavily try to persuade this training provider to come relocate, move to DC, come to our physical office. Now, maybe I can get that training provider to still stay in St. Martin and get the work done. Or with the world becoming flat, there are other training providers. So in essence, the work can go to the talent, and especially with the Gen Zs and millennials, they're really liking this aspect of remote work. Now, conversely, I was talking to one of my friends who's a union rep for a government agency, and I said, well, at the end of the day, you have to be careful about remote work, because if you can work from anywhere, the company can hire from anywhere. So, especially for organizations, at the end of the day, an organization, the goal is to make money. So if the goal is that, if you say everybody can work remotely, then yes, then the organization can look to places where the cost of living is less, and that's where you staff work. So it really gets to understanding where you're going to get your talent, how you are going to identify your talent, but then from a talent management standpoint for remote work in this example, how are we training our leaders and supervisors to lead in a remote hybrid work environment? How are we setting up our employees to succeed and thrive in this same environment? So what it takes is, it takes understanding, like taking the time to stop and get multiple perspectives. Also ask questions and see your strategy, see your change, see your initiative from a systemic point of view instead of a simple cause effect. I think one of the simple things, let me jump back into my training aspect from a talent management standpoint. In the book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution by Klaus Schwab, he basically laid out the case that, and this came out, I believe, 2015, 2016. He laid out the case that where we are right now, we are focusing on what is now the fourth industrial revolution. And he often talked about in organizations, the goal is to be able to empower your employees and to empower your customers. And to do that, the drivers to have emotionally intelligent leaders who are aware and can connect. And they also know how to, they've been skilled to be flexible, agile, and they can sit down and they have a process to be strategic and map out plans and map out strategy. And I know for me, when I put on my training hat, those adjectives, strategic, agile, and emotionally intelligent, every training we do for our employees aligns to that, because we feel that whatever strategic need comes up, if our leaders and supervisors have been taught to be strategic and they've been taught to be agile, and they've been taught, or we hire because they can connect and build relationships with people, then in the end, we can empower our customers, empower our employees, and meet our goals. So from talent management standpoint, when you're putting this together, you really have to look at it from the standpoint of, and when I look at talent management, it really breaks down to these five things: um, selecting, onboarding, performance, training and development, promotion, and succession planning and offboarding. So selecting and onboarding talent, it really gets to how are you going to identify, from a strategic standpoint, how are you going to fill that need? And I mentioned earlier, is this something that can be done internally? Do you need to hire externally? Do you need to use contractor support? And then based on that, how do you get that talent on board the right way, and then bring them in, obviously, where they come in and they feel valued? How do you improve your candidate pool? Um, how do you provide a candidate experience where they feel like, even if they don't get the job, they know why they got feedback. They know why they didn't get the job. They felt like they were being valued, and that the hiring officials in the interview process were expressed and conveyed gratitude for them for participating in the interview process. Sorry. Performance. Okay, how are we going to um, set our talent up to succeed in this new strategy? How are we going to rate and review employees and managers based on, from a talent standpoint, so that we can succeed? So if your goal is to empower customers and empower employees, and customer service is important, how are we making sure, do we have the right metrics to assess performance throughout the hierarchy, the structure? And then how do we then reward and recognize those who are performing well, and then hold accountable and train or improve those whose performance is less than stellar? Training. So again, how are we going to fill that gap? We've done this workforce planning, going back to the Sir Alex Ferguson model. We know that there's a definite skill set needed 3 years from now, that skill set is not within the organization now. How are we going to fill that gap? Or the example I used where the lady felt her team wasn't providing stellar customer service, but there was no training plan to get them there, which, at the end of the day, if you're not providing the right type of training to get you where you need to be 3 years from now, then you are going to, then that strategy is not going to be as successful. Promotion. As talent wants to move up the ladder or situations come through turnover, retirements, what's our promotion philosophy? Are we developing staff to move up throughout the hierarchy? If not, do we have a plan or a pipeline to identify talent to come into those positions? I think the data would say that not all the time, but a lot of times, if you build a process where people can move upward internally, that is good for strategy, that's good for consistency, that's good for knowledge, all of the positive employee outcomes that can happen would happen. It really gets to understanding for your strategic change from the talent management standpoint. What's our philosophy for promotion, and how do we set those up who want to move upward and onward internally to succeed and thrive in this environment? Succession planning and offboarding. What are we doing when it's time for staff to move on or retire? Um, is that part of a natural progression? And I'm not one of those who believe that all turnover is bad. Sometimes an employee can reach their, especially now, like on the back end of the pandemic. I've talked to so many people where their purpose has changed. Um, part of the great resignation is what I do now may not, what I wanted to do then may not be what I want to do now. Um, Maybe I don't want to commute anymore. Um, what's the plan to anticipate succession planning? And sometimes that gets as simple as knowing your staff. Johnny just made his last tuition payment on his son who graduated from college, and he and his partner have bought a retirement home in Florida. There's a good chance he may leave. Okay, what type of talent do I need for that function? What skills is Johnny taking that we may need to replace elsewhere? So it really gets to having a good succession plan. It really gets to how do you create a good offboarding experience. Deloitte, in their research on the return to work, talked about the new movement toward boomerang employees, where those are employees who leave the organization for whatever reason, but you leave the light on for them should they want to come back, or maybe they want to come back in a better role. How do you create an experience and build your brand where they will either would like to consider coming back, or if someone called and said, hey, I got an opportunity to work for X company, their experience was so good they're like, hey, you will enjoy doing it there or working there, or kind of like your Glassdoor. Like you go to Glassdoor and and people go there and they find and they get the reps on organizations based on based on when employees have offboarded and what their experience was. So for this recap, what I'll basically say is, it's very important to consider the role of talent management as part of your strategic plan, and that really gets to your HRO. I'm sorry, your chief human resource officer. Are they in the conversation when the strategy is happening? Um, from a talent standpoint, what type of talent do you need for this strategy now? Some point in the future, maybe that has changed. And then as you get into the talent management process, from a strategy, when this strategic change happens, how have you adapted for how you onboard, select, train, develop, promote, and offboard and succession plan for talent? So it's been a pleasure to bring this presentation to you. I'm Russell Robinson. These are the hats I wear. You can reach me at the email at the bottom of the screen. Um, Look forward to speaking at this career strategy conference. A shout out again to Dale and Francis Wade for inviting me to participate and allowing me to be part of this stellar group of presenters. Have a great day.